Hi, I'm Ingo from Roast Rebels, and in this video I will introduce you to the BMORE 2020 SR coffee roaster. The BMORE roaster has been on the market since quite a time. So Joe Beam, who has developed this machine, started in the late 90s with developing it, and then in 2007 it came to the market. So it's now since about 13 years on the market. It has been continuously developed, and so there is really a lot of experience in the roaster. It's a proven roaster, and especially in the US there is a large community of people who are roasting with it since years, so you will find a lot of information, roast profiles, tips and tricks for the machines, in coffee boards and so on. Now it's starting to get into the European market. Joe has made the testing and the certifications, so from this year on it will be also available in Europe, and I'm quite sure it will also have a nice community of people that will share profiles, experiences with the roaster. It's a very simple to use home roaster, so you can either automatically with just one press of a button more or less roast really nice coffee. And on the other hand, it has also the possibility to manually roast, so to further develop your roast profiles, to bring your own style of roasting, your own profile in the roast chamber. The roaster can roast from 100 to about 450 grams of coffee, which is actually a nice range, especially for home roasters. And in addition to that, it has a mechanism, a patented mechanism, like an afterburner who is reducing the smoke so that it can be used inside, which is a really nice feature of this roaster. When it comes to the BMORE roaster, I will do 2 videos, maybe later there will be some more, but this session I will divide in 2 parts. In this video now, I will talk about the roaster, about its features, what I like about the roaster, what I like a bit less about the roaster, what I think for whom it's a recommended device. And then I will do another video where I really will go into the panel, and we will do a roast together in another video, and this will be linked here. So you can maybe start with this video if you want to know if the BMORE roaster is the right machine for you. If you already have one and want to see how the machine is working, then go to the other videos directly. So construction-wise, the BMORE roaster has a quite large roast drum in it. This drum is removable, so you can put it in, take it outside. It's quite large. It's made of a metal mesh, and it's actually about the width of the roaster. And in addition to that, so the heating is an electric heating. It's 2 quartz infrared heating elements that also expands more or less to the whole width of the roast drum, so that you have really an evenly heat transfer to the beans. The roasting machine has an airflow in it. It's a fixed airflow, so you cannot change the airflow. When the air is getting out of the roaster, you have this afterburner here, who is then really helping to reduce the smoke. So I said you cannot change the airflow, but what you can change is the speed of the drum. So you have 2 drum speeds in the machine, which kind of helps you to change the mix of convective and conductive heat transfer. The machine has in it 5 different roast profiles that are already set in the machines. They differ a bit from characteristic of the beans, so you either choose like profile 1 for really strictly hard beans, and then it varies a bit, especially it's according to the density of the bean. And maybe you know my video about density of the bean and how to change roast profiles accordingly. Joe has already done this work for you and programmed 5 profiles in the machine. They also vary a bit on the amount of coffee beans that you put in the roaster. So when doing an automatic roast, you choose the profile, you choose the amount of beans that you're putting in the roaster, and then you start, and of course at the end you choose your roast degree, so the point where you stop the roast. In addition to that, there is no possibility to do your own automatic roast profiles, so you cannot add roast profiles, automatic roast profiles to the roaster. It's just the 5 that are in it. But the range of these roast profiles is really nice, so you have quite a good range of roast profiles already set. But what you can do is manual roasting. And in manual roasting, the possibility to influence the roast are the power of the heating element. So you can change it in 5 steps from 0% to 100%. And the other thing that you can change is the drum speed. You have 2 drum speeds, a bit lower and a bit higher speed, and that's the influences that you can take, of course, in addition to the roast time that you can decide on yourself. The roaster doesn't measure bean temperature, that's just construction-wise, because you have this movable roast chamber, so you cannot put a thermocouple here. But what Joe did, so that you have some measurement points for the heat, is he has one thermocouple that measures the exhaust temperature and another one that is measuring the temperature of the roast chamber. So on one side there is a thermocouple which measures the roast chamber. So with these two measurement points you can then control your roast. This means just like in other roasters who don't measure bean temperature, you can talk about roast profiles with people that have the same roaster, with people that have BMORE roasters. There you can easily exchange roast profiles. It's really hard then to exchange roast profiles with people that are working on a drum roaster with bean temperature. That is just for you to know. But since there is quite a large community of BMORE roasters, you will find a lot of profiles, and of course, we will also, in the course of the next weeks and months, then develop roast profiles that you, as always, can find on our website. With the roaster, you can roast between 100 and 450 grams of coffee. What you just have to know then is with 100, if you do a light roast with 100 gram, you roast for about 8.5 minutes. And with 450 gram, a light roast is taking around 18 minutes. And for me personally, this is quite a long roast time, especially if you want to have a more acidic, a filter coffee profile. So if you do these light roasts, these filter roasts, then I wouldn't personally go to 450 gram. I would maybe choose 250 to 300 gram. You have to find a little bit out according to your taste what you like, but just for you to know. So there is the possibility to roast 450 gram. I would recommend to go to about 250, 300 gram, especially if you want to pronounce fruitiness, sweetness, acidity in the coffee. So if you want to look in the machine, then you see here there is this quite large chaff collector, which you clean after each roast. And then you have here this roast drum that is made of this steel mesh that you can open here and fill in the beans, put again into your roaster. And here in the roaster you can see these 2 quartz infrared heating elements. And what you can't really see on the video, there is also a lamp here that lightens the roast quite nicely in the roast chamber. If I think about who is the perfect target group for this machine, then it's really home coffee roasters. So this is for me a classical machine for people that roast coffee for themselves at home. What you can do is, for example, if you start a small business, if you start a coffee trading company and you don't want to spend too much money, then you can roast samples with the coffee. What you cannot really do is profile roasting, so develop roast profiles for your roasting machines, because there you really want to have a bean temperature and maybe also a really classical drum roaster. But yeah, beside of that, this is really the machine, if you ask me, the machine that I would recommend to a classical home coffee roaster. So when it comes to things I really like about these machines or things that you have to take into consideration, then first of all, it's the easiness of use. So really, You can do a roast with just pressing more or less one button, and then you have an automatic roast profile, which is really giving you a nice coffee. And the thing that you have to take into consideration, and then you see it especially when you watch the other video where we go in depth into the panel, is that for all the buttons on the panel, they have different functions according to whether you are roasting in automatic or in manual mode. And therefore, if you're roasting, especially if you do manual roasts, then it's not so intuitive as other roasters, which just have more or less one or two buttons to turn or to press. So it's not super intuitive, but on the other hand, it's also not that complicated. I mean, you have got just these functions of changing the power of the heating element, changing the drum speed, pressing a button to measure exhaust temperature, pressing a button to measure the roast chamber temperature. So it's not that difficult, but it maybe helps you to have some notes with you, especially if you start, or the manual to see which button is for what function. The capacity of 450 grams is of course really nice about this machine. As I said before, it depends a little bit on what kind of coffees you are roasting. If you do more or less classical, darker espresso roasts, you can try the 450 grams, but especially if you want to pronounce the acidity, the fruitiness, if you want to have really clarity in your filter profiles, then I wouldn't go to the 450 grams. I would choose a bit lower capacity of around 250, 300 grams. It's really roasting nicely and evenly. This is something I really like about the roaster. Also that it has an airflow and therefore a mix of convective, conductive heat transfer. And what is nice about the roaster is that it has a cooling inside, but just construction-wise, since the whole machine is heating up, when you fully cool the beans inside the roaster, it's just taking quite long. And then you have the risk that you don't really stop the roast at the point that you want. So what I recommend you is after a couple of seconds or minutes in the cooling cycle, open it here, open the roaster to really fasten the cooling process, because perfectly is around 4 to 5 minutes cooling of the beans. And what you have to know is when you open the door, then some chuffs will fly around, so you will have a little bit of mess with chuffs. So if you do this and open the door of the roaster, then probably do it somewhere where it doesn't really disturb if you have some chuffs flying around. You could also, after a couple of minutes, take out the drum and then cool the beans externally. What you anyway have to take into consideration is that you let the beans cool for a couple of minutes in the roaster, just because if you're opening it directly after the roast, then you have a high risk that you're damaging electric components. Therefore, anyway, the producer isn't recommending to do external cooling. If you decide anyway to do so, in any case, let it cool first for a couple of minutes in the roaster, then open it, take it out, cool it externally, put the empty drum again in the roaster, and do the roast, do the cooling cycle anyway with the empty roaster. The smoke reduction is of course something really nice if you want to roast inside. It doesn't perfectly remove all the smoke, but it's working quite nicely. Especially if you're roasting naturals, then you have more chuffs, then you have more smoke, but with washed coffees, it's working really quite nice. The roaster has an open construction, so you will have chuffs in the roast chamber, and therefore you really have to take care of the maintenance of the roaster. This is something important, and you also have the manual where it's written several times. Anyway, read the manual. This is a recommendation from my side. It's also an interesting manual, not only about the roaster, but also about coffee roasting. And if you don't clean the roaster nicely, then you have some chuffs in the machine, and you have the risk of either a smoky flavor, because they're burning then in the roaster, or even a fire if you have a lot of chuffs in the roaster. Therefore, after each roast, clean it. Maybe with a hoover, just take out the chuffs out of the roast chamber before you do the next roast. And after every fifth roast, then do an empty roast and clean it with a cleaner gently, and about every 4th month you should open it here, and then also clean the vent so that the roaster is well maintained and the whole sensors, the heating and everything is working perfectly. So you will be much happier with your roaster if you really take care of the maintenance of the roaster. And something I really like about it, of course, is, I mean, it's quite light, it's easy to move around. In any way, I think it's a quite beautiful roaster, so it doesn't disturb to be in the kitchen, but if you don't have too much space, then you can really easily take it away, put it somewhere else. So that's it. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to know more about the functioning of the roaster, how a roast is being done, then have a look at the other video. You'll find it here, where we really go into a roast process. And if you have any more questions on the roaster, on any other roaster, on the roasting in general, then I always look forward to hearing from you. You find my contact on roastrebels.com.